Jeremy Renner's snowplow accident in January 2023 proved to be even more graphic than initially reported. While attempting to assist a stranded vehicle near his home, he was suddenly pulled under his 14,000-pound snowplow, which crushed his body with so much force that he later recalled hearing the crunching of his own bones. Renner sustained 38 broken bones, a collapsed lung, severe cranial trauma, and required extensive reconstruction with metal plates in his chest, legs, and face. Among the most horrifying details he later revealed was that the impact had dislodged his left eyeball so severely that he could see it sticking out with his right eye. Despite the injuries, Renner remained conscious throughout the ordeal, fully aware of his condition, and at one point attempted to write what he believed would be his final words to his family. The actor has since regained much of his physical function, thanks largely to his daughter's support and his own relentless determination to continue living. In 2010, University of Alabama Huntsman professor Dr. Amy Bishop was at a biology department meeting when she pulled out a handgun. A witness said that she got up suddenly, pulled out a gun, and started shooting each one of us. She started with the one closest to her and went down the row shooting her targets in the head. This wasn't random shooting around the room, this was execution style. Amy killed 3 of her colleagues and injured 3 others before her gun jammed, forcing her to surrender. During the investigation, it was found that Amy had shot and killed her brother in 1986, but was never charged since the death was ruled an accident. She was also questioned after a 1993 pipe bomb incident that was directed at her lab's supervisor. And in another previous incident, she punched a woman in the face for taking the last available booster seat at an IHOP. Along with obvious mental health problems, Bishop was apparently motivated to murder her colleagues after the university denied her tenure. She was eventually sentenced to life in prison. Just last year, a 23-year-old man died from a catastrophic spinal injury while playing at a Topgolf with some friends. In what was described as a prank gone wrong, his drunken friends had pushed him off the platform, causing him to miss the safety netting and fall 12 feet directly onto his head. In 1990, a flight heading from Medellin, Colombia to New York City crashed onto a hillside after running out of fuel, killing nearly half of the passengers on board. While being treated for serious injuries, 2 of the male passengers were arrested when ER doctors found baggies of cocaine that they'd swallowed and attempted to smuggle. Both men were sentenced to 6 years to life in prison. The British Pet Massacre was a week-long event in 1939, during which an estimated 400,000 cats and dogs, 1/4 of England's pet population, were killed out of fear of them eventually being gassed or left behind during an evacuation. Almost immediately afterwards, the event was recognized as completely unnecessary, stemming from social panic from the impending war and people seeking a way to feel like they were contributing to the war effort. None of the fears that led to the massacre actually ended up materializing. Initially known for her ridiculously large implants, German model and actress Martina Bigg says she identifies as black. She's had 23 breast augmentation procedures, as well as numerous perma-tanning treatments to darken her skin, eyebrows, and eye color. The woman says she was baptized as a real African woman while living in Kenya and hopes to build bridges between races. During a camping trip in June of 1969, 6-year-old Dennis Lloyd Martin was last seen hiding behind a bush, planning to jump out and scare his father before he completely vanished. Despite the largest search in Great Smoky Mountains National Park history, no trace of him was ever found. While serial killer Edmund Kemper was serving time in prison, he participated in the Blind Project, a volunteer program where he recorded audiobooks for the visually impaired. Kemper spent over 5,000 hours in the recording booth, as his deep voice was apparently well suited for narration. In 1978, Amos Atkinson held an entire restaurant of 30 people hostage while armed with a shotgun, demanding that his criminal friend be released from prison. But the situation took an unexpected turn when the man's mother stormed the building in her pajamas and hit Atkinson over the head with her handbag while telling him to stop being so stupid. Atkinson then surrendered peacefully. Chandler from Mr. Beast videos suffers from a genetic eye condition called a chromatopsia that only allows him to see the world in shades of white, black, and gray. It's a rare form of color blindness where all 3 cone types are completely absent from the eye, resulting in the inability to perceive any colors whatsoever. Scottish guitarist Les Harvey, known for performing with multiple rock bands throughout the 60s and 70s, narrowly escaped death in a fatal car crash in 1965, only to be fatally electrocuted on stage in 1972 after touching an ungrounded microphone. This gravestone is shared by twin sisters Emily and Minnie Dodsworth. Emily lived for just 2 days while Minnie lived for over 100 years. In 2003, a Houston doctor stepped into an elevator when its doors malfunctioned and suddenly closed on him. The elevator then shot upward unexpectedly before the man could fully enter, instantly severing his head and shoulders while leaving the rest of his body in the hallway outside. A young nurse inside the elevator was physically unharmed but severely traumatized after she was stuck inside the elevator with the doctor's remains for several hours. Iconic actor Jack Nicholson has faced his fair share of legal controversies over the years. In 1996, he reportedly assaulted an unnamed Hollywood socialite at a party and ruptured her breast implants. Then that same year, he allegedly promised a prostitute named Catherine Sheehan $1,000 for sex and then assaulted her when she asked for the money. Sheehan claimed that Nicholson promptly grabbed her by the hair, thumped her head on the floor, and then threw her out of his house. She received a $40,000 settlement, but later argued that this was insufficient to cover her injuries, including brain damage, which she said was actually killing her. In 1849, Henry Box Brown escaped from slavery by shipping himself in a small wooden crate from Virginia to Philadelphia. Despite the instructions on the box of handle with care and this side up, carriers placed the box upside down or handled it roughly several times. 350 miles and 27 brutal hours later, Brown stepped out of the box a free man and went on to become a magician. When later asked why he went to such an extreme to escape slavery, Brown was quoted saying, "If you've ever been deprived of liberty as I was, you cannot realize the power of that hope of freedom." In 1963, Frank Sinatra's 19-year-old son Frank Jr. was kidnapped from his hotel room in Lake Tahoe and held for ransom. He was released 2 days later when his father agreed to pay the $240,000, and the three perpetrators were captured and arrested soon afterwards. But the kidnapping had a lasting traumatic impact on Frank Sr., who began carrying dimes in his pockets everywhere he went, since the kidnappers demanded all communication be done through payphones, and Frank was concerned that one day he wouldn't have enough change to call them. It became such a habit that the legendary singer was even buried with 10 dimes in his pocket after he died. In January of 1993, Texas attorney David Glenn Lewis planned on watching the Super Bowl alone at home while his wife and daughter were out shopping, but when they returned, there was no sign of him. They found freshly made sandwiches in the fridge, David's laundry in the washing machine, and David's watch and wedding ring on the counter, but no David in sight. The next night, a man was killed in a hit-and-run 1,600 miles away near Yakima, Washington, and 11 years later, the body would be identified as David Glenn Lewis. How David ended up 1,600 miles away so quickly and the circumstances surrounding his death remain total mysteries to when Robin Williams appeared on the Inside Actors studio in 2001. An audience member laughed so hard at one of his jokes that he developed a hernia and had to be rushed to the hospital in an ambulance. In 2012, a movie theater in Beirut was raided for showing K-porn, and 36 men were arrested and subjected to anal examinations to determine their sexual orientation. In Lebanon, people can be charged with intercourse contrary to nature, specifically intercourse that involves anal penetration, and can receive up to a year in prison. In the past few decades, some morbidly obese patients have been sent to zoos for MRI and CT scans because standard hospital machines can't accommodate their weight. Zoos have bigger machines designed for large animals, making them practical solutions in these extreme cases. Chicago's Iroquois Theater was advertised as absolutely fireproof when it first opened in 1903, but the building only lasted 37 days before being destroyed by a massive fire that killed 602 people, in the deadliest single-building disaster in the United States until 9/11. On a cold winter night in 1977, 48-year-old Teresita Bassa was found brutally murdered in her Chicago apartment. Her body had been left naked under a burning mattress with a knife still embedded in her chest. The case quickly went cold with no suspects and no apparent motive, until months later when police received a chilling phone call. A local man claimed that his wife, who had worked with Teresita, began channeling messages from Teresita's ghost during trance-like states. During these eerie episodes, the woman would apparently speak in Teresita's voice, identifying her killer as a man named Alan Showery. Even more disturbingly, the alleged spirit named stolen items that were taken from her apartment, including specific pieces of jewelry that Showery had stolen from her. As absurd as it sounded, police followed these clues, and shockingly, they all checked out. Showery was arrested and eventually confessed, making this one of the most bizarre criminal cases in modern history. In 2021, Lady Gaga's dog walker Ryan Fisher was walking 3 of her French bulldogs in Hollywood when he was suddenly attacked by 2 men. After being shot in the chest, which resulted in permanent damage including the partial loss of a lung, he still tried to protect the dogs, but 2 of them were taken. Gaga later offered a $500K reward for the return of her pets, and 2 days later, a woman brought the dogs to an LA police station. The woman was later arrested along with 4 others in connection with the crime and tried to sue Gaga for not paying the reward money, asking for the $500K plus another $15 million for financial damages, pain and suffering, mental anguish, loss of enjoyment of life, and legal fees. She claimed that she never would have returned the dogs if not for the promised reward, and was therefore defrauded because she ended up with no dogs and no reward. The woman ended up losing the case, while shooter James Jackson pleaded no contest to attempted murder and was sentenced to 21 years in prison. In 1983, Carla Faye Tucker murdered a couple with a pickaxe while attempting to rob them, striking each of them more than 20 times and later saying she felt a sexual thrill with each blow. Tucker was sentenced to death for her crimes, but after converting to Christianity during her time in prison, there was a worldwide campaign to spare her life, even involving Pope John Paul II and the brother of one of her victims. However, Texas Governor George Bush ultimately blocked the appeal, saying, "The gender of the murderer did not make a difference to the victims," and Tucker was executed by lethal injection in 1998. South Carolina woman Mary Wilson was using her blow dryer when she suddenly passed out with her hand on top of it. The dryer continued blowing hot air directly onto her skin for at least 20 minutes, causing third-degree burns all the way to the bone. Wilson was rushed to the hospital, where doctors found nerve damage so severe they had to amputate her entire hand. The yellow outline is the size of SeaWorld's parking lot. The green dot is where orcas will spend their entire lives. Just 2 days after his 18th birthday, star football player Warrick Dunn lost his police officer mother in a fatal shooting while she was off duty. But despite this, Dunn raised his 5 siblings while in college and was selected as the 12th overall pick in the NFL draft. He's since funded and built over 150 homes for single mothers, using his wealth to improve their lives. In 2008, suspected serial killer Ricky Simmons was found dead of heat stroke in the trunk of his ex-girlfriend's car. Investigators believe Simmons was waiting in the trunk to ambush and murder his ex-girlfriend when he became locked in the vehicle. A few years after receiving a bone marrow transplant to treat his leukemia in 2019, Nevada man Chris Long discovered that the DNA in his blood and semen had been completely replaced by that of his donor. Long had essentially become a chimera, a person with 2 different sets of DNA. He was quoted saying, "I thought it was pretty incredible that I can just disappear and someone else can appear." Experts say this was an extremely rare case, but one that raises serious questions about forensic evidence at crime scenes. On December 14, 2012, 6-year-old Jesse Lewis wrote "I love you" with his finger in the frost on his mom's car. Just hours later, he would be killed in the Sandy Hook school shooting, but died a hero. Before he was fatally shot, Jesse saved the lives of 9 of his classmates by yelling for them to run while the shooter reloaded. In 2004, French authorities found a fully functional movie theater deep in the Paris catacombs, complete with seating, projectors, and a full bar. When police returned a few days later, the entire setup was gone and a note was left reading, "Do not try to find us." Just last year, a woman with type 1 diabetes died after opting for slap therapy instead of taking her insulin. She apparently had a lifelong fear of needles and grew tired of pricking herself, so she went to an alternative healer who treated her with the traditional Chinese method of slap therapy, during which the patient slaps themselves in order to expel poisonous waste from the body. She died on the 4th day of treatment due to not taking her insulin, while the alternative healer received 10 years in prison. In 1966, a teenage boy was flying a kite in Brazil when he stumbled upon 2 dead bodies lying in the grass. Later identified as electronics technicians, the men were wearing matching formal suits, raincoats, and most bizarrely, homemade lead masks covering their eyes. One of them had a note in his pocket that read, "Be at the agreed place at 4:30. Take capsules after the effect. Protect metals. Await signal." There were no signs of violence, and no clear cause of death was ever determined. The capsules were never found, and toxicology reports proved inconclusive due to organ decomposition. The men had been seen acting nervous and paranoid in the days leading up to their deaths, while reportedly measuring distances in the hills and carrying around a notebook filled with strange codes and symbols. Their families later stated that the men had been obsessively studying obscure books on alchemy, spiritualism, and intense luminosity experiments. Their bizarre deaths remain a total mystery to this day. Eminem's track Brain Damage was inspired by his real-life childhood bully, D'Angelo Bailey. In an interview, Bailey once boasted about beating Eminem so severely that it caused a concussion, bleeding from the ears, and temporary vision loss. In 2001, Bailey tried suing Eminem for slander over the song, but the case was thrown out by the judge, who delivered the ruling in the form of a rap. This photo from 1977 shows a Rhodesian soldier interrogating a group of captured rebels. The men had to hold this position until they talked, and the first one to fall would receive a bullet in the forehead. In 1982, 7 people in the Chicago area randomly dropped dead after taking cyanide-laced Tylenol capsules. The incident changed packaging laws forever, but the killer was never caught. In 2021, a 39-year-old man was reported missing in Barcelona. Days later, his rotting corpse was found stuck inside a papier-mâché dinosaur statue located outside of an abandoned movie theater. He'd somehow dropped his phone inside of the statue, crawled in to retrieve it, got stuck, and died upside down. During a match in Germany in 1993, star tennis player Monica Seles was stabbed in the back with a 9-inch kitchen knife by Günter Parch, an obsessed fan of her rival Steffi Graf. Parch was infuriated that Seles had overtaken Graf as the #1 player in the world, and admitted that he wanted to injure Seles so severely that she couldn't play tennis for a long time. Following the attack, Seles took a 2-year hiatus from pro tennis and never fully regained her prior dominance. The attacker received a suspended sentence with probation and psychological treatment, a verdict that sparked widespread outrage across the sports world. In 2019, a French man accidentally killed his friend during a fight and in a panic stuffed his body under his mattress. To avoid suspicion, he slept on it for nearly 2 years while regularly spraying air fresheners and bug repellent to mask the stench. He was eventually caught when the odor became overwhelming for his neighbors. In 1984, California man David Burke was fired from his airline job for a petty theft, so he smuggled a loaded gun onto the flight, shot the pilots mid-air, and deliberately crashed the plane into the ground, killing all 43 passengers on board. Investigators later found a note in his pocket addressed to his former boss stating, "I asked for some leniency for my family, remember? Well, I got none, and you'll get none." Mel Blanc, the voice of Bugs Bunny and many more, started smoking at age 9 and changed his name from Blank to Blanc after a teacher told him he would amount to nothing just like his name. He was once involved in a head-on collision at a Sunset Boulevard intersection known as Dead Man's Curve, a spot notorious for accidents. The crash resulted in a 2-week coma, and he was completely non-responsive until a doctor decided to ask him, "How are you feeling today, Bugs Bunny?" Blanc then responded to him in the voice of Bugs and thus woke up from the coma. This also happened in the middle of production for season 1 of The Flintstones, for which Blanc was the voice of Barney Rubble. So during his stay in the hospital, the other actors would crowd around his hospital bed to record their lines. Around 40 episodes of The Flintstones were recorded in this manner. After the legendary voice actor died from heart disease and emphysema in 1989, his tombstone read, "That's all, folks." In 1918, Austrian artist Oskar Kokoschka commissioned a life-size doll of the love of his life Alma Mahler after the end of their affair. He requested that it be constructed with swan skin with the feathers still attached, and stuffed with sawdust, cotton wool, and horsehair to mimic the softness of flesh. He even asked for anatomically accurate features, including a mouth with teeth and a tongue, and specified that the doll's intimate parts be perfect and luxuriant. The result was apparently so lifelike and disturbing that Kokoschka's butler suffered a stroke immediately upon seeing it. It's illegal to save baby sea turtles from predators if you don't have a permit. So if you ever see this happening before your eyes, you must let nature take its course unless you're willing to risk jail time. Why? In 2001, a 6-year-old boy was undergoing a routine MRI scan in New York after surgery to remove a brain tumor. While he was sedated inside the machine, a metal oxygen tank was accidentally brought into the MRI suite, where the powerful magnetic field violently pulled it across the room. The tank struck the boy in the head with devastating force, fracturing his skull and causing brain injuries that were fatal. When the 2-year-old daughter of Chelsea Camp was being mauled by a vicious pit bull, the Texas mother had to act fast. She jumped on the dog's back and bit off its ear before shoving her fist down its throat to save her little girl. Both suffered serious wounds from the dog, which belonged to Chelsea's boyfriend and was normally very friendly, but suddenly turned on the toddler. The pit bull was still attacking when police arrived and had to be euthanized. In 2007, a Rhode Island hospital was fined $50,000 and reprimanded by the State Department of Health after brain surgeries were performed on the wrong side of the patient's head 3 separate times in the same year. During the mating process, dogs and other canines get stuck together for anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour. It's a natural physical mechanism called a copulatory tie where both of their genitalia interlock to ensure fertilization. The first time dogs mate, they're often surprised by this and show signs of distress while trying to pull away or run. A man from Vietnam had endured severe headaches for 5 months before finally going to the hospital. After a CT scan, the man and his doctors were shocked to find that a pair of chopsticks were lodged in his skull. It turned out that the man had been involved in a drunken fight 5 months prior that he barely remembered, and somehow ended up with chopsticks deep up his nose as a result. This is why you should never trust a pair of twins. In 2008, Swedish identical twins Ursula and Sabina Eriksson suddenly sprinted into oncoming traffic on the M6 motorway in London. Ursula was struck by a truck and Sabina by a car, yet both miraculously survived. But as paramedics tended to them, they both violently resisted help, with Sabina screaming, "They're going to steal your organs." She then punched a baffled officer and tried to run into traffic again. Ursula was hospitalized, but Sabina was released the next day despite continued erratic behavior. Just hours later, Sabina encountered a man who kindly offered food and a place to stay, only for Sabina to stab him to death the next day before jumping off a bridge while fleeing from police. Despite fracturing her skull, she survived yet again and was later sentenced to 5 years for manslaughter. There was no evidence that drugs or alcohol was involved in their sudden strange behavior, as the incidents have been chalked up to an episode of shared psychosis. After just one date with him in 2018, Arizona woman Jacqueline Adis allegedly sent a man over 159,000 texts over a 10-month span. Some of the texts were incredibly disturbing threats like, "I'd make sushi out of your kidneys and chopsticks out of your hand bones. I'd wear your fascia in the top of your skull and your hands and feet." Adis was later arrested for trespassing inside the man's home while he was out of the country, but she was later declared mentally incompetent to stand trial and the charges were dropped. This is the 2,000-year-old skull of Mary Magdalene on display at St. Maximin Basilica in France. It's considered to be one of the most precious relics in all of Christendom. In 2008, 19-year-old Brandon Swanson drove his car into a ditch while driving home from a party. He called his parents and told them he was fine, but wasn't sure exactly where he was. Nearly 50 minutes into the call, he suddenly yelled, "Oh shit," and then went silent. He's never been seen nor heard from again. YouTuber Eugenia Cooney rose to fame in the early 2010s for her fashion and makeup videos, but over time, fans grew increasingly concerned over her visibly deteriorating health, with many suspecting a severe eating disorder. In many clips, she appears to be extremely thin, fragile, and shaking, with bones protruding beneath her skin, all while cheerfully discussing beauty routines. Viewers have pointed out moments where she seems disoriented or struggles to sit upright, yet continues streaming, sometimes for hours in front of thousands. As Eugenia's following grew, so did the concern that young and impressionable fans idolized her skeletal frame. In 2019, she entered treatment and appeared healthier upon returning, but over time her condition seemed to regress, sparking renewed accusations of glamorizing eating disorders to vulnerable audiences. YouTube and Twitch have faced mounting criticism for allowing Eugenia's content to remain accessible, despite the ongoing concerns about its potentially harmful influence. In his later years, Nikola Tesla became obsessed with a particular white pigeon, claiming that he understood her and she understood him. He said he loved her like a person and received visions from her. When the pigeon died, he said that the light in his life had gone out, and he knew his life's work was finished the moment she died. In 2019, a man from the UK suffered a 9-day erection after crashing his moped. The injury had disrupted his blood flow, causing his wiener to remain engorged. Once at the ER, he was classified as having a grade 4 erection, the highest possible tally on the erection hardness score. Doctors had to drain the blood and surgically redirect the vessels before the man made a full recovery. Despite having no prior acting experience, 12-year-old Kevin Clark was cast as drummer Freddie Jones in the cult classic School of Rock. Sadly, he died in 2021 at the age of 32 after being fatally struck by a car while riding his bike in Chicago. In 1978, 134 Chinese sailors were killed because a Navy lieutenant broke up with his girlfriend. Scientists have conducted studies where they transferred gut bacteria from schizophrenic humans to mice, resulting in the mice exhibiting schizophrenic behaviors. This suggests a potential link between gut health and the development of mental disorders. In 1997, 50-year-old Massachusetts woman Judy Smith was in Philadelphia with her husband when she told him she was going out sightseeing in the city, but she never returned. Months later, her body was found in a forest 600 miles away in North Carolina wearing different clothes and a new backpack. She had been mysteriously stabbed to death, and her killer remains unidentified to this day.